Hi, everybody. This is Friday, March 21st, and Netty Car is interviewing Bud Overn and his daughter Lisa. Lisa, what's your last name? Blakely. And it's Cheryl Revkin on camera. So we're at the Silver Lake Library. There's a little map of Silver Lake behind us. And then also on the table, Bud was kind enough to bring many photos, which maybe we'll pick up during the interview and take a look at. So go right ahead.
Well, do you want me to just free associate from my first memory? Or?
Yes, I mean, well, let me ask you a couple questions. Like, where were you born?
I was born next to a golf course, Nibley Golf Course, on Windermere Avenue, 1927, February 6th.
Okay.
Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City, okay.
I don't remember any of that because my family moved when I was about 2 to Los Angeles.
Okay. And your parents' names?
My dad's name was Oscar Wilhelm Overn.
Okay. And when did you move to Echo Park? That was the next move from Salt Lake City?
Yeah, that would be 1929.
Okay. And what street did you live on?
We rented a house on Scott near the intersection of Lakeshore.
Okay.
And there was an itinerant cameraman who came around with a pony and a cowboy outfit. So he took a picture of my brother and me all dressed up like cowboys.
Do you have that picture here?
I think it's here.
Uh-huh.
And since I was just a little over 2, I couldn't hold the pistol up. It looks like I'm shooting the pony in the head.
Cheryl, should I bring the picture out? Or
Sure.
Do somebody else want to bring it?
And in the background of those pictures that he took of us on the ponies is a retaining wall. And I went by recently and looked at that, and on top is a groove to channel water towards the street.
Okay.
My brother Tom told me he'd like to put a ball at the top end and watch it roll down that groove to Scott Avenue.
So then that would have been about 1929 that you moved to Echo Park from Salt Lake City?
Yes.
Okay, and then when did you move from Echo Park to Silver Lake? Or to Edendale? I'm sorry, let me clarify that right, to Edendale.
We made several different moves. After we left Scott, we moved to Lakeshore Avenue between Berkeley Avenue and Effie Street.
Okay.
That was 1616 Lakeshore.
1616 Lakeshore Avenue?
Yeah, and we rented from a black postal worker, Mr. Barfield. So there's a picture somewhere of us with his family.
It's right here.
Yes.
Wonderful picture.
And I'm the little guy with a ball in the lower right-hand corner.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's great.
So this was his landlords, what's kind of the neighborhood kids, right? Your siblings and...
Yeah, we were like the our gang comedy. Little rascals. And my Scandinavian parents, of course, came without prejudice, so we're half and half Scandinavian and black.
Uh-huh.
And Minion does.
Yes.
And so then shortly after that, we moved just up the street and around the corner onto Effie Street on the backside of what we call Movie Hill because of the movie studio on the other side.
And that studios, what was the name of that studio?
Max Senate.
Max Senate Studios.
Yeah. Now, the movie industry had moved from Edendale west, so that property was kind of abandoned. And so was that big sound stage, which I think was one of the first sound stages built.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of movie industry along Clinton Boulevard and what we called Edendale at that time.
Right.
This is a picture of the Max Senate Studios. Maybe I'll pull it up here.
Just over a little bit more, please.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. And down.
Uh-huh.
There you go.
All right. Thank you for bringing that.
Now, on the back side of the studio was an opening for a crawl space. And my adventurous older brother and his pal crawled in there and crawled under the basement, came up through an opening into to that studio.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very careless about their film. I guess they didn't care about it. So they left cans of film there. So my brother liberated some of that, because it made good stink bombs. You'd like that? I thought, gee, I wonder how many, historical pictures you destroyed. But he told me that they disintegrate anyway, that early film just turns to powder. So next time he tried it, they had a watchman there. And when they popped up, he had this shroud over him. He went, oh. It scared the bejabbers out of him, so they never tried that again.
So when you moved from Echo Park to Silver Lake, you moved first, you said on Effie Street? Or?
Yeah, he lived shortly for a while on Effie Street, 1922 Effie Street.
1922 Effie Street. And then you moved to...
And then we moved to McCollum Street.
Right. And the address at the McCollum Street.
Which dead-ended again against Effie Street. So most of my life, Effie Street was nearby. And I have to wonder who was Effie. Someone must have named after his wife.
We have this picture, you said, of Effie Street behind the trolley.
Yeah, this is looking west across Glendale Boulevard from the Max Sennett studio. And there's a dirt Effie Street, and now it's been cemented in steps. And I had to go up and down those steps every day to school. Went to Clifford Street School.
Right. Okay, so you moved in
1932, we moved to McCollum Street.
Oh,
Silver Lake.
1932, okay.
And we thought this was really a neat place to be because it dead ended, like I said, to Effie Street. And above there was a 35-acre private estate, the Garbett Hathaway Estate. And so that was a real nice location. And pre-smog, we could see Catalina Island. We could see the fireworks at the Coliseum.
Right.
When the smog came in, we couldn't see the bottom of the hill.
Wow. And you
Was this a picture from McCollum Street?
No, that's Lakeshore, 1616 Lakeshore. And I just started school at Logan Street.
Oh, Logan, so you started school at Logan Street.
Yeah.
So then when you moved over to McCollum.
Started on Logan, and then when we moved to McCollum, for some reason they made the district that I went to Clifford Street.
Clifford Street.
The Logan Street. The Logan Street, the only thing I remember was they passed some cream around. We all shook it and it turned to butter or something. But my sister said there was a class that they taught there called Sloyd. It was a Scandinavian craft that the kids went through. S-L-O-Y-D, I think it's Swedish.
So there were a lot of Scandinavians in the neighborhood? Is that brought your family here?
If you look at the 1930 census of that block on Lakeshore, between Berkeley and Effie Street, it looks like the United Nations. There's Scandinavians, blacks, Mexicans, Jewish, the whole thing. Yeah, it was a mixed neighborhood.
Right.
Was this Clifford Street?
This is Clifford Street, and this is my brother here. And they were doing Knights of the Round Table, and he made most of the swords, shields, and I remember they made the helmets out of, they put a stocking cap on them, took paste and strips of paper mache, made the helmets.
Is Charles Hathaway in this picture? Is one of the Hathaway children? Because I know that they went to Clifford Street School with you folks.
Yeah, I have another picture of Clifford Street School, and my brother's sitting with Frank Hathaway.
Frank Hathaway.
And Charles Hathaway.
Was that a name? Oh, was that this one? Clifford Street
Yes.
School? Yeah. Here, I can take
And I noted, here's Frank, and there's my brother Tom.
Did the school go through 6th grade?
Yes.
So you guys played with the Hathaway children at one point. I know you had, Tom had told me that you went to a party there one time with their...
Yeah, Charles invited me to his birthday party. Boy, I was kind of awe-inspiring. This poor Norwegian kid up here in this beautiful mansion, but this is Hathaway was a very gracious lady, made me feel comfortable. And sometimes I'd walk home with Charles. He asked me to accompany him up the Clifford Street entrance to the estate. I guess part of it was camaraderie, but some of it was because kids had this hate the rich kid on the hill syndrome. And I don't know why, because he was just like the rest of us. They didn't put on any airs, and they felt sorry for the kids that couldn't afford shoes, that they were wearing gunny sack clothes. It was a real mix of poor kids and And then you had the migrants from Oklahoma because of the Dust Bowl, so yeah, it was quite a mix. But I think he liked me to walk with him so the bullies wouldn't give him that time.
Right.
And besides being the wealthy kid on the hill, the Hathaways were Republican, and most of the people down here were Roosevelt Democrats, you know.
So, and when you were going to Clifford Street School, you also went with the Watson family kids, right?
Yes, the Watson families lived on
photographers.
Berkeley. They lived on Berkeley, just right near Alessandro. And since it was only a block to the Max Sennett studio, whenever they needed kids in any of their movies, they'd call it Pops Watson, and he had 9 kids. So it's okay, we'll take you, and you. So they all ended up doing movie work at one time or another, the most prominent being Delmar, who was in my class, and Bob's, the younger one. And I remember once I saw Bob's on Saturday at the Ramona Theater, which was on Sunset and Mohawk. He was crying. And in fact, they called him Crybaby Watson because he could cry on cue like that. So I went up to him the next Monday and I said, Bob's, how can you just cry like that? He said, whoa, I just think of my dog dying. But many years later, I asked his older brother, Delmar, I told him that story, and he said, well, probably what they said was, kid, if you don't cry in this next take, we're going to kill your dog. I don't know whether to believe Delmar, because that whole family was a bunch of jokesters.
Right.
In fact, to jump way ahead to Delmar's funeral, as they were trailing his casket to be interred, one of the surviving brothers hung a handicap placard on his casket. It seemed like kind of grim humor, but I know Delmar would have loved it.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to go to their family archive, which your brother Tom set me up with, and they
By the
have
way, last
big history.
night's episode of Beulah Hauser about the searchlight on top of the City Hall
The beacon.
showed Delmar prominently because his uncle, George Watson, was the one that said, why don't we call it the Lindbergh light? Because it was 1928, and Lindbergh had made his famous flight at 27. So when the war came on, they took it down because they didn't want a beacon to allow the enemy clear shot into LA, and then they lost track of it, and it was about to be salvaged or thrown out when they discovered it in the basement of the City Hall, and now it's been restored and put back up there.
Wow. Okay.
Well, back to the old neighborhood, it's interesting the names of streets. Like Glendale Boulevard, which is where my dad had his color glaze business, about where the freeway is now, it's gone, was originally called Lakeshore because it was on the shore of the lake. So Lakeshore ran up under Sunset and dead-ended at Effie Street. There's Effie Street again. But when they made it the main route to Glendale, the city of Glendale, they renamed it Glendale Boulevard. This truncated Effie Street at about Sunset, and all that's left of it is the piece that goes from Sunset up and kind of deadheads into Effie Street. So that explained finally why they called where I lived at 1616 Lakeshore. You could see the lake, there was no lake up there. Yeah. Now another funny name was in front of the Max Sennett Studios. Alessandro came through there, so they called it Alessandro for a while up to Fargo. And then finally they decided to make it all one name, Glendale Boulevard, all the way up to Glendale.
Was the impetus for this when the red car came through, like in 1904?
Yeah, I think they extended the car from Edendale on to Glendale.
Because the photo that you have of the red car, right? Was it a red car? Was that the Edendale
I
line?
think I call it a trolley car.
A trolley car,
It was
okay.
before they had the nice red.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really an old-fashioned trolley car.
Well, so was that one of the original ones that ran?
Yeah, that was early on, and on it says Edendale.
Right,
And of course now they call Edendale Silver Lake.
right.
So Edendale.
Yeah, you should sort of expand on that because there's always a lot of controversy about that. Because, you know, growing up, I always thought that Echo Park was on the other side of Glendale Boulevard, and then Silver Lake started but that whole hill between Silver Lake Boulevard and Glendale Boulevard is actually where Edendale was.
Yeah, if you read Max Sennett's story, you'll see that he uses that term Edendale all the time because that's where his studio was. He finally fell on hard times, I guess. But another name that's different is where Sunset Boulevard goes through kind of the business section of Echo Park. Originally that was called Reservoir because the Echo Park Reservoir came that far up. And so that's why when you stand on Sunset Boulevard and look west, you see this big wide street going up over the hill. And that's called Reservoir. But they jog Sunset around instead. They plan on making Sunset Boulevard go up and down over that hill and reconnect over by Silver Lake Boulevard.
I see.
So when I was a kid, I went walking Reservoir West looking for a reservoir. There was none. So that explains why that was called Reservoir. It's a remnant. Yeah.
So when you were growing up in Edendale, it was called Edendale because you had your Edendale Library on Glendale Boulevard.
Edendale Library was just on Glendale Boulevard right at the split. And it didn't look like a library.
It was just like a little...
Looked like a little old house.
Yes.
And it was very quaint. Now it's a church, I think.
Right, it's still there. It's a church.
So we would walk from Clifford Street School as a bunch, up to the library there. And the Hathaways told me they spent a lot of time there too. That was a real cozy atmosphere.
So a lot of times, I know your brother talked about adventures that he had. I know Tom was very adventurous.
It's more adventurous than I.
Yeah, well, you were the younger one as well. But you tell us a little bit about Uncle Harry, the gentleman who sort of, kind of mentored you young guys. And
There's a thing here.
That's your brother?
no, Uncle Harry was a stunt man, right? I'm sorry, he was that stuntman, yes.
Yeah,
And he
well,
worked
he
for the
lived-
studios.
He lived on Duane, facing down to the reservoir. And his house didn't look like the other houses. It looked like a cowboy ranch house. And we loved on the way home from school to stop there. Because to me, since I didn't have any relatives here, they were all in Norway, well, he was like my grandpa and uncle. And he told me that where the reservoir is now, Silver Lake Reservoir, was an orchard. I can't remember if he said it was apricots or peaches or whatever, until they dammed it off and made a reservoir. So it was a fruit orchard at that time. So Uncle Harry worked at the studios, and I think what he did was the plaster cast that they used for doing Cecil B. DeVille type stuff. Now he also homesteaded in the Santa Monica Mountains, and he built some more of these cowboy ranch style houses there, and every summer all the boys from the neighborhood would go up there and spend some time with him.
And what was his name again? Harry Stunt?
Harry Stunt.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I went there in the summer of 1940, and there was a fire in the Santa Monica Mountains, and I didn't stay there. We had to get out of there.
Oh,
But they named the road up there Stunt Ranch Road.
Stunt Ranch Road.
And I saw recently on PBS a thing about hiking the Santa Monica Mountains. And there in the background was a sign that said Stunt Ranch Road. So his name is still there, Harry Stunt. I think I've got a bit about him somewhere in this collection.
Oh, great.
He was one of the early pioneers of the Silver Lake area.
Right, okay. Obviously, if he lived there before the lake was, it was an orchard.
Was it this
No, it's a single piece.
single piece that has typewritten things on it? We'll find it later.
Yeah, sorry for the mess. No, that's not it.
Okay, well, go ahead.
So tell me a little bit, about your adventures. I know you weren't as adventurous as Tom, but you must have gone out and around the neighborhood, and how was, obviously it wasn't too populated, the hills were still rolling hills, and...
There was a vacant lot below our house, 2 above us, 2 on the other side, all over the places. And of course, the boys loved that. We went around all summer barefoot, in fact. And on the side sloping down to the Silver Lake Valley, I guess you'd call it, we get in cardboard boxes and slide down that dry grass. It was very slippery. And that was a lot of fun until my tailbone in a rock mat through the cardboard and that was the end of that. So it was a lot of fun playing there. And even though the estate was fenced off, that didn't stop boys. You know, forbidden fruit, so we'd sneak over and get some of their fruit from their orchards.
Mr. Garbutt had several types of orchards. He had gum orchards, right?
Yeah, in the backside on Duane, he had a lot of eucalyptus trees. And he was, I hope it was friendly competition with Wrigley. He was going to make chewing gum, compete with Wrigley using the sap from those eucalyptus trees.
Oh.
So when Charles Hathaway walked me home with him one day, he showed me this building. And I said, "What's that?" He said, "That's their gum factory." So I guess they were serious about it at one time.
Mm-hmm. But Mr. Garbutt was also, from what I read, history, very involved with the building floats for the Rose Parade, the early, Rose Parades that they had, and he had something to do with the studios as well, right?
Yeah, he was involved in everything, and his son-in-law, Hathaway, who married his daughter, was a developer, and they owned the LA Athletic Club.
Right.
And my friend Charles Hathaway was the head of that until he retired. He lives in Marina Del Rey now, and we still correspond.
Right, and it's a very interesting little book, and he's...
Yeah, he gave me his memoirs.
Right. I got you lent it to me to read. It was great. It told a lot of the history about the family and the neighborhood. So even though it was Frank Garbutt's property, because in my generation it was always been called Hathaway Hill, but it was the Garbutt Hathaway Mansion.
I got to tell you a story about Hathaway Hill. Charles wrote me and said he wanted to take his family up there, show them where he grew up, and they wouldn't let him in because he wasn't on the list.
Oh, this is where now that it's developed with all the houses.
It has the garden shack there now.
He would have been sad anyway to remember those rolling hills and to see those houses, that housing
So
tract.
they tore down the left and middle mansions, but they didn't tear down Garbutt's mansion because it's solid concrete. And the story is that he was afraid of fire, so he didn't want any wooden building. So he had this concrete mansion that's still there. And by the way, it has an elevator from the garage up. Probably the only elevator for quite a distance till you got downtown.
So it must have really stood out when you were a young boy because there weren't many houses around it. Because my grandmother lived on Clifford Street as well, and was with kids. There was gates on Clifford Street, and we always, wondered, about the mansion and who lived there and so on and so forth. But
yeah, that was pretty prominent up there, especially Garbutt's mansion.
And then he had built 2 other houses for his children. He had 2 children, right? A daughter.
The one was for one of the daughters, and I don't know much about her. I was feeling that maybe she was handicapped mentally or physically, so they didn't talk much about her.
I see.
One farther west was for his daughter who married Hathaway.
Okay.
And Mrs. Hathaway, during the Depression, she worked for Paramount, I think, as a bookkeeper or accountant or something.
Okay. And you said that, they were very, very nice to them. I mean, because what I read in the books, that they had gone to a private school. They were Christian Scientists.
Yes.
And they went to a private school like in Beverly Hills. But then when the Depression hit, that's when they came and went to Clifford Street School for a couple
Charles
of years.
told me that one of the reasons they left Clifford Street was they were very friendly with the principal, Mrs. Carroll, I think it was. And when she moved, they went with her. And then they ended up in private schools and so on.
Let's see. Okay, any other experiences about just going, the lake before? I mean, obviously, in the 20s it's been modified several times, and there was probably, they said you could have got up a lot closer to it, where they had built all the modernist homes, Neutra.
Speaking of that, when we leave to go this way, instead of going to Boulevard, we said, "Dad, can you go by Silver Lake?" East Silver Lake, because we wanted to see that house, the Notre house. And we thought it was, we used to say keen then, I guess now you'd say cool. Cool wasn't a word. And everything was keen or double peachy keen. My dad didn't like it because he was a traditionalist and it looked like a cube of a bunch of glass, But I found out later that Notre also did many of the buildings in the Civic Center of Santa Ana where I live now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he probably should get more credit. But Frank Lloyd Wright gets all the publicity.
Well, he's pretty popular over here in Silver Lake.
Right.
You know, he's definitely left his imprint on Silver Lake, like a lot of the modernists. But as you said, in those times, it was very unique, that glass and beams and
So, I guess it was about 1937, maybe, we talked our dad into letting us go up in light planes that had their airport on the riverbank. I think it would be at Fletcher.
Right.
And so we flew over the Silver Lake Reservoir. And when I got back, I said, "Tom, did you see the reservoir?" He said, "See it, I threw a rock in."
Sounds like Tom.
This is an aerial view that you said?
Yeah, this is an aerial view in 1933 of the garbage Hathaway Estate. And this is our house right there. You can see all the vacant lots. Well, it was a keen place to grow up.
And back to that airport, because Tom had told me the story about it as well, and that it was right on the LA River, what would be Elysian Valley now, right? There was like a little landing strip right next to the
right on the
river.
riverbank. Of course, when the great flood of '38 came along, it wiped it out.
Right.
And it also took some houses of people we knew who lived on the river. Their houses floated away. I think their name was Baxter. And the park benches were floating in Echo Park. The lake came up so full.
Right.
Yeah, that was a trouble.
These are some high school pictures.
Well, I don't know if these are pertinent to so much the Silver Lake. This is more Los Feliz. This is the field, athletic field at John Marshall. And as you may know, they used it for the final sequence in Grease, the movie Grease. And sometimes they like to shoot out front because the facade is pretty classic. And this is the Letterman Club at John Marshall. I won my letter in the high hurdles. Think about it now, I wonder what must have been crazy. Well, when you're 16, you got no sense.
Right. Well, so before you went to Marshall, you went to King, though, right?
Yeah, I went to Thomas Starr King.
Okay.
And this was a beautiful school. It was white stucco with the red tiles.
Wow.
And in the courtyard was a fish pond with a drinking fountain on one end. And I did a linoleum block cut of it somewhere around here.
Is that the Ichito, the statue?
And there was a statue of a kneeling Indian there. I think that's the only thing left now.
Yeah.
Because of the Field Act, they had to tear it down. That was sad because they had a sloped auditorium. There's beautiful tile pictures on each side, full stage. Yeah, it's great stuff.
Yeah, they recently, I want to say in the last 10 years, a local woman got involved with trying to clean up the we called it Ichito when we were growing up. That was the name because the Indians took it over. So they sort of went in there and removed the graffiti and stuff and sort of restored it and planted some aloes around it. So it is still there and alive and part of the school, which is really great,
Yeah.
So when you went to Marshall, what graduating class were you in?
Winter 45.
Winter 45. So Marshall opened in what, 30?
Yeah, mid-30s, I think. So it was a pretty new school. In fact, they just gotten the football field, the athletic field, finished. My older brother Tom said there was just a bunch of dirt when he was there for a while. And then they put the east addition on it before I got there.
Okay, so when you would walk from your house in Edendale over, how would you go to Marshall? Over the hills or?
I only did that once when I was going to Thomas Starr King. I was going to walk to Sunset Boulevard to get the red car. And there was a street that said Effie Street. I said, there's Effie Street again. And I knew Effie Street was just above my house on McCollum Street. So I thought, well, I'll just walk Effie Street.
One hill down
Yeah,
there.
puffing and puffing up those stairs, I turned around and looked at a beautiful view down Hollywood Boulevard. And then at the top there was a large estate there too, which was Marino's, I guess. And my understanding is he was an early movie star and wanted to start Marino Heights there, and then the Depression hit, so that kind of fell through. I remember when we'd be driving on West Silver Lake, there was a real estate shack there. They're trying to interest people in buying lots there, but nobody had any money. So it kind of fell fallow for a while. Now it's the place, I guess, in Silver Lake. Yeah, so I had to climb up there, down the other side, and then back up the other side of the Silver Lake Valley to get to McCollum at Effie Street. This is a picture given to me by a boy who went to Clifford Street School and TSK, John Marshall. His name's Charles Bartello, and it's a Boy Scout troop, 78. And in it you can see Harry Watson. There's Delmar Watson. There's my friend Raymond Ballard, a couple of the other boys. Boy Scout, local Boy Scout troop. I wasn't a member.
So was it the Edendale Boy Scout troop, or
I don't know if they called it Edendale or...
just a number?
I think they went by number, yeah. Incidentally, Charles Patello, last I heard, was still alive, so I didn't want to interview him.
Do you have some contact info for him?
This is a cartoon I did for the annual at Marshall High. Everybody was into a guy named Sinatra. On the left, saying Tommy Dorsey's band. Everybody said, "Are you crazy? Tommy Dorsey is, the GM of big bands. You're gonna be sorry if you left." He made it big. Oh, let me tell you about that. My older brother Art was in the Navy. 1941, he enlisted so he could avoid the draft. He didn't want to be drafted in the Army. Enlisted in the Navy, that's more upscale than the Army infantry. So he was in New York on leave, and he was walking down the street, and somebody came out and grabbed him and said, "We need somebody to pose for an ad." So there he is with this model. I forget what it was, for some cosmetic company or soap company or something.
Oh wow, that's great.
That'd be about 1942. And of course, it showed up in the LA Examiner, and his girlfriend who was waiting for him saw it. And said too well. But we were startled to open up the paper and see it. Yeah.
So that's your older brother Art. So you have
Right.
Art and Tom, and then you have a sister as well, right?
Yeah, my sister was the oldest. She was Edith. She went to Belmont High, crosstown rival from Boston. But she married shortly out of high school and went to San Francisco, so she was out of touch with some of these adventures.
And when did you leave Edendale?
When did I leave Edendale? Well, let's see, in 1932 we were living on Effie, which wasn't paved. And this was just around the corner from Lakeshore, between Lakeshore and Alvarado, North Alvarado. So we moved from there up to McCollum Street in 1932. And I remember the Olympics were big then because they were held in LA. We didn't attend, but my dad brought home a lot of souvenirs and stuff for that. I don't know what happened to all that. Wish I still had it.
And so you stayed in the house in McCollum until you married and moved away? Okay.
Yeah,
what year?
except for my time in the Army, I stayed there till I married, and then I lived in Glendale and Echo Park for a while, married, and then in '56 moved to Orange County. My wife got a teaching job at a new school in Santa Ana.
And your family, your family home is still in the family.
Yeah,
your sister-in-law.
1655 McCollum
niece.
Street. My brother Tom bought that from Dad, as well as the apartment next to it. Now, I don't know if my dad knew what was going to happen, but he built that apartment next to it, a 4-unit apartment. Right before the war started, when you couldn't get material.
Sorry about that. Forget about the technology.
Science also.
So this is a picture of the back of the house. This is my parents in front of the house. The approach to the estate is in the back of my home. This is my mother sitting on the front porch of McCollum Street. So So my dad entered the United States in 1920. And by 1930, he had his own little shop on Red Hill Boulevard next to Echo Park Lake. He bought out a color glaze company.
And color glaze what, for tile?
Yeah.
All right.
And so he was going around trying to shop some work. And he went to Hollenscheid McDonald, whose trademark was Hall Mac, Hollenscheid McDonald. They were the biggest in the world at that time for bathroom accessories. In fact, you look at some houses still in the back plate, it will say Hall Mac on it. So they said, well, you can only do black and white. And my dad said, I think I can do color. They said, no, you're crazy, you can't do color. So my dad got a white tile, and he colored one end red, the other end blue, red, white, and blue, took it to Hallmark, and they said, oh my gosh. So he started running back and forth doing contract work for them, and finally they said, why don't you just move in with us? So from that time on till 1942, he had steady employment while everybody else was standing in soup lines. Now in 42, the government shut down Hallmark as non-essential. So now he's out of a job, but everybody else is getting work at the Lockheed shipyards. I thought that was kind of ironic, but it was just reversed his lifestyle. But by then he built that apartment on the lot he bought next door, so he had some income from that. And then he'd do odd jobs, carpenter work or painting houses, hanging wallpaper, and I'd be his assistant. So he managed to survive. And then he bought the 2 lots above him, which dead-ended against Effie Street. And so there was a rather wealthy man who owned a restaurant downtown LA who wanted to buy a lot to build a house on, which would be the last one on McCollum against Effie Street in the estate. And I guess my dad said, well, I want to sell both lots. So I guess the guy said, well, okay. Then my dad said, but I'd like for you to build your house on the upper part.
Yeah.
So that's why there's a nice gap between our old house.
It's true, you have beautiful on both sides.
Yeah, I don't know if that's legal, if you can tell somebody that.
Maybe that was one of the conditions of selling it to him, you know?
They made that a condition, and that house is still there too. And it's the last house.
What restaurant did he own, do you know?
No, I don't. I wish I knew that information. His name was Mr. White. And that's all I know about him.
And I know that Tom expanded on that he had some interesting neighbors, and I do know Flora, I don't remember what her sister's name is, but they lived across the street, and they were they were socialist, as your brother said, they were red.
Yeah.
And
They lived across the street from us, and that was Herricker was her married name.
right.
And the sister's name was Polo, Flora Polo.
Flora Polo.
And
The older sister's name escapes me, but I know she came out here to live with her because her mother had died, and she was her older sister, but at 19 years older than her.
so when the war started, the agents came up and interviewed them. Then they made the mistake of talking to my dad, who was a foreigner from Norway. And my dad rose up on his toes and got Scandinavian mad and said, listen, I got 2 sons in the service and he's going next. And these big FBI guys backed up. I said, okay, and they left.
Because Tom had told me that he was down on Sunset Boulevard near Echo Park one day, I don't know what he was doing, and he met these people on the corner, and they were had these papers that they were selling, and he said, well, I'm not buying one. He said, well, here, you can have one, and it was some socialist paper, you know, and then he brought it home, and your dad's like, and he said, yeah, but there was, other people that lived, our neighbors, that were involved in that whole, red thing. That's how your brother described it. Because I told him that I knew Flora, and when Flora, because she had moved to Echo Park after she got married. He goes, oh yeah, that was the commie family that were neighbors,
Yeah, well, there was, like I said, a whole mix of ethnicity, religions, and political. Yeah. In fact, on my one block on my street at the top, you had the Hathaways, who were Christian Science, who were Mormon, and there was a Protestant, there was a Jewish family at the bottom near Berkeley, and right on Berkeley was a German Catholic family.
United Nations,
so
like our country.
Diversity.
Yes.
And I remember when I'd be coming home and I'd pass the Jewish family, the father would call me in to turn on the light or something because it was Sabbath and he wasn't supposed to do anything. And the mother would call me in and give me gefilte fish, which I didn't appreciate.
Okay, so but after you graduated from Marshall, you went into the service. What branch of the service?
Well, to back up, like I said, my brother Art, he enlisted in the Navy. And on December 7th, 1941, we were going to drive him to San Diego. We got to Oceanside, and when we came out from lunch, the newsboy was saying, Pearl Harbor, Pearl Harbor. So we had to leave him there to hitchhike to San Diego. We went back home. Then my brother Tom got in the Air Corps. Still, Hitler didn't quit until I came along in Army Infantry. I guess Hitler said, 2 square heads I can stand, but 3 no. So I was in Army Infantry early 1945. Well, President Roosevelt died, and then Truman became president. And then they dropped the bomb, and so it was all over. So I was sent to Camp Brooker, Alabama, for advanced infantry training, which would have, if the war hadn't ended, would have been an invasion of the mainland of Japan. So there's a lot of controversy about that bomb. But for me, you know, it's another story. Because I don't know what that would have been like, landing craft on those islands in Japan. So then they finally sent me to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, which was a great separation center. Everybody went for their discharge in what they called the Great Class of 46. But while I was there, you could get the nice transportation on their electric train into Chicago, and everything was free. You get on the bus and they just wave you on. You go into the service center and say, I'd like a ticket to the movie. They give you a free ticket to the movie or to a show. YMCA I could use their swimming pool. So they were very friendly in Chicago, or else Mayor Daley was buying future boats. I don't know what.
Probably both.
So then in October 46, I was separated from the Army.
And then you went on to, what type of a
That's a
career?
whole other chapter now.
Right, because now you're
Post-war,
home,
yeah.
you're married, and then
Yeah.
what type of work did you do? What was your?
Kind of work.
Yes.
Well, to go back to my first real job was at the Holly Theater on Sunset Boulevard near Echo Park. It's gone now.
Was it by where the Holloway Cleaners was?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Originally it was called Holloway, and they shortened it to Holly. The same man owned the Ramona, which was on Sunset at Mohawk. And those were the 2 neighborhood theaters. So my first job was at the Holly. And I went upstairs in my brother Art's suit because I was tall enough and I fit. And the manager was interviewing me, and he said, well, this job only pays 20 cents an hour. And I'm thinking, every time that big hand goes around, I get 20 cents for watching movies? I can't believe. Well, I found out it wasn't that simple. You didn't watch the movies. And when everybody had left and it was all over, you had to go clean the restrooms. I won't say whose was the messiest. And you had to take a tea strainer and strain that sand thing where people put their cigarette butts, what a stale cigarette smell like. And the worst part was, you had to, twice a week, you had to drag this ladder out from under the stage, go out the back door and around to Sunset Boulevard, set it up and change the marquee. Now this was like a puzzle, because you had to figure out which letters you're going to keep for the new, from the old, and which new letters you're going to need. So one day I was up there on that ladder, and the boss that owned those 2 theaters said, whatever you do, don't drop any letter E's, because we can't get any more. And E's the most used letter, in our
Okay.
So that was kind of tough. And then when school started, I quit, of course.
How old were you when you got that job?
I was about 15 or 16.
And then you went to, what did you do as in most of your working years?
Okay, after I got out of the service, I didn't know what to do, but I had a lot of back trouble when I was in the Army. Well, you march at 25 miles with a steel helmet, a full backpack, your M1 rifle, and the BAR plate, and my back would bother me. Now, if you say my back aches in the Army, immediately they tag you as a gold breaker, a goof off. What they didn't understand was I didn't go during the week. I went on the weekend when everybody else was out drinking and carousing. So they thought I must be sincere. So I went to the dispensary and the lieutenant poked me and said, okay, here. He showed me the door. And I went out the back door. There was a box of aspirin, phenacetin, and caffeine, or APC. And I noticed that every guy that came out had a box of APCs. So I asked one of the guys up in the barracks, they said, oh yeah, we GIs call it all-purpose cure, APC. So finally they decided that I was sincere enough they should investigate a little more, so they sent me up for an x-ray. And on the basis of that x-ray, they said, okay, they didn't tell me what was wrong with my back. They just said, you don't have to do 25-mile hikes anymore. So the next time there's a 25-mile hike, I see all my buddies marching up in a cloud of dust, and I say, man. And just as they disappeared, the sergeant said, Overn, fall out to the warehouse. So I'm in the warehouse till 2 a.m. lifting all these big boxes. I said, okay, I got the picture. Can't battle City Hall or whatever you want to call it. So anyway, I got out of the service, and I remember on Glendale Boulevard near Brandon, between Clifford and Brandon, was a chiropractic office. So I went to see her, and she adjusted me. She said, well, what are you going to do now? You're out of the service. And I didn't have a clue. She handed me a brochure, so I went to the Los Angeles College, got my degree, and that's what I did mostly the rest of my life was working in the healthcare.
Oh, okay.
As a chiropractor.
Yeah, but when I started practicing on Alvarado with a guy named Dr. Robin Hill, this would have been on Alvarado between maybe Scott and Reservoir.
Okay.
But when my wife got this nice teaching job in Santa Ana, well, I had to start all over. So somebody told me they're opening a new hospital in Costa Mesa, Fairview State Hospital. So I went there and got my psychiatric technician license. And after a while, I heard they were having an LVN state board exam. It's a 3-day exam in Long Beach. So I went and challenged it on the basis of what I already knew in my experience. And so I got my LVN license. Then Fairview had an in-service program to get your RN. So I went through that, got my RN. And I worked in hospitals and RN for a while, psychiatric mostly.
Okay, we're going to ask about a few of the pictures here if you want to describe them for us.
We start with that one.
Okay, this is on Effie Street, 1932. My parents immigrated from Norway in 1920, so I had no grandmother, grandfather, aunts, uncles. But I got this suitcase, came to me from my grandmother in Norway, that'd be my dad's mother. And I opened it up, it was full of Norwegian chocolate, which would be pretty good. There was also a silver knife with my initials on it.
Wow.
Well, I probably ate all the chocolate and lost the knife, but I kept the suitcase to put my Charlie McCarthy puppet in.
Oh.
I was big on Charlie.
You still have it?
I still have the puppet. And I've also got the tickets from the Los Feliz Swedish American Breakfast Club where Eddie Bergen and Charlie McCarthy appeared in person.
Wow.
So my mother and I rode the red car up to Victor McLaughlin's place, then we walked back into the country club, which was behind the swimming pool.
Now, is that the Victor McGoggin's place on Riverside Drive
Yes.
in Los Feliz?
Yeah.
So did you actually ever go to the stadium when you were a kid?
No, but we went to the plunge, the pool.
Yes, the plunge.
Of course, we'd
It's right
see
next
Victor
to it.
McLaughlin in the movies, and then he and his motorcycle group would put on shows at the Coliseum, trick riding and all that kind of stuff.
So at the stadium there, they did horse shows, and then they did like car shows. I mean, they did a lot of different things at the stadium, right, on Riverside Drive.
I guess so. Like I said, I was never privy to any of
I mean, I've seen some beautiful postcards of it, and I know the 1938 flood actually damaged it, and that's when they took it away.
Yeah.
So what is this one? This is a plane, one of your hobbies?
Like I said, Lindbergh's flight in 1927 turned all the boys on to building model airplanes. They were made out of balsa sticks and covered with tissue paper. It's really, I can't imagine kids doing it nowadays. And you had to carve your own wooden propeller and use rubber bands, which you wound up for propulsion. This is my brother Art with one of his own designs. We couldn't afford a kit because they cost 25 cents or maybe even 50. And he would go down to the corner market and he'd ask the butcher to reel out a piece of paper that they used to wrap the meat in. Then he'd take his T-square and his triangle and he'd design his own airplane.
Mm-hmm. And you flew them like around the hills by your house? Or
Oh yeah, and so did Charles Hathaway and Frank Hathaway.
Mm-hmm.
They launched it from the top of their hill.
Yeah, they had an advantage then, right?
Ours would fly over on their estate and we went over there and get them.
Uh-huh.
Hope we didn't get caught by them.
Okay, these two.
Oh, okay, when we moved up on McCollum Street about 1932, my brother Tom brought with him this tortoise, which he found on Movie Hill when we lived on Effie Street. And so in more recent times, when I had a tortoise, I took it up to his house on McCollum Street to try to duplicate the pose.
That is great.
Oh, that's great.
I don't know if you want to talk about the Swedish Society.
Oh yeah, this is Swedish American Society. Had Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy, who were just about the biggest thing in radio about then. And so my mother apparently kept the stubs, and they're sequential: 1251, 1252. And so all the information is there about where it was, a country club.
So the Swedish Club, is this something that your family went to events there, or festivals, or?
Well, I guess the Swedish American Society was prominent in Los Angeles. And that was one of their events.
Did you guys, I mean, I know your parents spoke Swedish, but did they pass it down to you? Did you, as a kid, learn?
They didn't speak Swedish, they spoke Norwegian.
Oh, Norwegian, sorry,
Because-
okay. Is there even a Swedish language?
They're pretty much the same.
Okay, all right.
The singing, the Swedes and the Norwegians.
Okay.
For one thing, I didn't realize till recently that Norway didn't get its independence till about like 1905 or something, because Sweden either owned them or Denmark owned them. They traded Norway off and on. So they finally got their independence. And the other thing that probably grated was when Hitler invaded Norway, he didn't invade Sweden. So they were neutral during the war, and Norway is occupied by the Nazis. So there's probably still a little bit of, and it's light-hearted humor, though. It's not anything serious, I don't think.
Did you want to wrap it up by telling us anything that, was most significant about being raised in Edendale? And I know you had expressed this to me before, that it's unfortunate that Edendale has sort of disappeared, in terms of using it as the name of the neighborhood, because now it's sort of called Silver Lake. And so that's what I was asking you. Where did you actually define Edendale? Was it from Glendale Boulevard to Silver Lake Boulevard, that hill right there?
Yeah, in my youth, I thought of Edendale as Glendale Boulevard from like Berkeley to Fargo.
Okay.
But Delmar said it really extended more than that. In fact, way towards Riverside Drive for a while. His family had horses back in there, and they supplied horses for the movie industry. And one of the uncles was doing special effects, but this was before computers. So they had to do it with wires. And they would make Eddie Cantor flying through the air on a carpet, really on wires. And Douglas Fairbanks, some of his tricks.
So that was the horse community over off of Riverside Drive by the McGuaglen Stadium and all of that? That's where the
So
horses...
apparently it extended right up there. I don't know the official boundary from Edendale, Silver Lake, but I understand recently that the Silver Lake community has established the embarkation at Waterloo for Silver Lake. But when I was at the Magic Castle in Hollywood, there's a large poster there, and this is like an aerial view, not photography, but an artist's rendering. And there it said Edendale.
Yes. So do you remember anything about Mixville, Tom Mix and
Yes,
Mixville?
I mentioned that in my article.
Okay, keep
Good
going.
it is.
Okay.
We heard that Tom X kept his horses there at the junction of Lower Edinburgh Street, and we call it Mixville.
Yes, I remember many years ago, there was a bar here called The Mixer, and it was right where the Vietnamese restaurant, is it Vietnamese restaurant?
Gingergrass.
Gingergrass.
Yeah, we call the market Mixville Market.
Right.
Incidentally, in the 50s, my dad built a house for my sister on Lakeview up here. I always thought it was funny because it was so far from the lake.
They called it Lakeview.
But when you stood on their backyard, you couldn't peek through and see Silver Lake Reservoir. So that's Lakeview there. They moved to Downey.
There's one more little picture that's in color anyway. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Well, this is a picture I took of Silver Lake from the East Hills. And it was early color photography, so I guess the color looks funny. She thought it had been artificially colored.
That house is still there,
Yeah, it is.
and you lived just down from
Well,
there.
we lived back east from there,
Yeah.
down the corner. But like I said, we loved playing on those sloping hills. Yeah.
And those hills were covered with, fennel, or, I mean, I know there's a lot of wild fennel around there.
And poppies and lupins would grow wild. It was
Wow.
beautiful. You don't see that anymore, I guess.
Yeah.
So when I got to Orange County, I got lonesome for poppies. So I went to the nursery and I said, I'd like some poppies. And the guy said, we don't have any. I said, what do you mean? It's a state flower. And he said, well, they don't transplant well. You have to grow them from seeds. I said, okay, I'll take a packet of poppy seeds in. He said, you don't want to plant them now. I said, what do you mean? It's springtime. He said, no, with poppies, you plant them in November. Then they'll keep going. If you plant them in the spring, they'll be once and then they're gone.
Oh, interesting.
So in the entrance to my neighborhood, I planted some poppy seeds and kind of decorated the entrance to my neighborhood in Orange County.
Okay. So is there anything that's special, what you want to wrap up this with, telling us about growing up in Edendale?
Well, my brother Tom had a magazine around for a while. That was a Saturday Evening Post and a Ladies' Home Journal. You had a little canvas sack, you put them in and it went around your neck. And when he moved on to other adventures, he turned his route over to me. And one of the customers was on Fargo, the steepest hill in the world, I guess. Fortunately, it wasn't up very far on Fargo, it was near the bottom.
Tom had told me that Mr. Fritter, or Mrs. Fritter from Holy Land was one of his clients as well, and he would go to the Holy Land exhibit and deliver magazines there. Did
And
you?
he also had a customer, and I remember going to that, off Cove up near the top. I think it was a teacher from Clifford Street, her name was Cox. And there were these cement steps, which were used in filming the Three Stooges, one about where they're trying to deliver ice. And it's not as well known as the Laurel and Hardy one down here in Vendo, off Sunset. But it's still there. We went to visit it recently.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bud, for sharing with us. It's really great. And I love hearing the stories.
Oh, we didn't leave anything out.
Oh, you did. Thanks so much.